Hello, and welcome to Alaris Financial Fitness, where we attempt to give your personal finance a workout. I'm Matt Sharto, and a quick disclaimer, we are recording in 2020. So it means that we are still at our houses, and if you hear a car go by outside, it's just because when setting up a home office, never got a chance to soundproof the walls. Today's topic is incredibly relevant this year, but will continue to be relevant as long as you can think out into the future, because we're talking about your bank account and your retirement account. To cover these, we brought in an expert on both of them. His name's Brent Brujink, and he has one of the most interesting career paths that I have ever heard. Brent, how you doing? Where are you calling in from today?
I'm doing well, man. I'm actually calling in from Command HQ, also known as my basement. So happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, from my home office / bedroom to your basement, why don't you tell us a little bit about the path your career has taken?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Matt mentioned, my career path is a little different than most in terms of the realm of finance, right? And so I started off as in the infantry, in the Army infantry, and then from there I actually became a police officer. So I was a police officer in the South for a few years before making the transition to the world of, banking, investing, retirement, and finance. And so I've been at Alaris now for going on 5 years as a lead business advisor. And I've got a lot of great stories. I've got a lot of great experiences that continues to propel me forward. So very grateful for all those.
Well, as much as I would love to ask you stories about your time in the infantry or something like that, maybe a tour in Iraq, something unclassified, we actually want your banking and retirement account knowledge. So, because today we want to talk about these accounts, because while we can log on to an app and look at how much we have in there, we see a dollar amount for both of them, right? They're represented the same way, but they're very, very, very different accounts, and they should be looked at differently. And you should look at that balance differently. So let's start with our bank account. So I log on to my app, and I see a dollar amount there. What do I actually own within this bank account?
Yes, this is actually your actual dollars, right, or in your bank account, whether it's your checking account or your savings account. So very possible this is money that's from your paycheck from your work, or maybe you got a graduation present or a birthday card from your grandma with $12 in it, or whatever the case may be, and you deposit that money into your bank account. These are the physical dollars that you own. They're held inside the bank. So that's your physical money is in your bank accounts.
Right, so I actually own the dollars. So if I log on and there's $2,000 less than 2 weeks ago, and I didn't do anything, and I don't know, that money went somewhere, I am $2,000 less rich, correct?
Yes, yeah. Something happened within the course of those days where you had spent $2,000 or you had moved $2,000 somewhere else. And so if you see that decrease, or on the flip side, we all like increases, right? So if you see an increase in your bank account, that means you actually have more money. A decrease would be you actually have less money, less dollars, less cash.
And I should probably have a talk with a significant other or a kid if I don't know where that money actually went. So when the balance goes up and down, I'm actually gaining or losing money. So let's move to a retirement account. In a retirement account, we can log on on the computer or log on to the app, and we also see a dollar amount. So on the surface, it looks the same. I see a dollar amount, but what do I actually own in the retirement account?
Right. So in your retirement account, like a 401k, for example, you're going to own shares of mutual funds in most cases, right? So there's going to be a dollar value assigned, and it's just that. It's a value of the shares, the pieces of those investments, those mutual funds that you actually own. So you're going to have a share count, the amount of shares, and all of those shares are assigned a dollar value. And so when you log in, as you mentioned, you're going to actually see the value of the shares of the investments that you own within the retirement plan, within the 401k plan.
So what could these shares be? Like, what's in these shares, these mutual funds?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Matt. So I like to use the analogy of a school bus and draw the parallel to the mutual fund, right? So think about the school bus. You know, the mutual fund is the school bus, and all of the students on that school bus sitting side by side are the actual companies inside the mutual fund, right? And the school bus driver is the mutual fund manager. So sometimes, you know, the kids might misbehave on the school bus and the bus driver might have to kick them off, right? And just like in a mutual fund, the companies that are inside that mutual fund, so for example, like, you know, Apple or Microsoft or Google, you know, Johnson & Johnson, those are going to be the businesses inside of the mutual funds. For this illustration, if one of those businesses isn't performing properly, then the fund manager may actually remove that business and find a different one to insert in its place. So the mutual fund is the vehicle, the investment vehicle, just like the school bus is the vehicle, right? And the companies inside the mutual fund, just like the children are inside of the school bus, with the school bus driver acting as that manager, making sure that everything is behaving the way it's supposed to inside the school bus, just as the fund manager does with the mutual fund.
So we own these mutual funds, and these mutual funds have a certain value because we own pieces of stuff, like in your example, they're companies. So I like this example because I could say, what if one of those students on the bus, one of the companies in my mutual fund is Disney? It's like I own a little square foot of Disney. I can go to the park and stand on the square foot and go like, this is mine. I own a little piece of Disney. So when we're looking at this value and we look at we log on to our app and we see the balance changing, what is happening in our retirement account when we see that balance change? We know in our bank account, when the balance changes, we are actually gaining or losing money. What's happening here when we see the balance change?
So when the balance is changing, there's fluctuation. It may be lower or higher depending on the day. And it's, of course, we're going to see both of those things happen as long-term investors. The actual value of the mutual fund shares that you own, those pieces of those companies, that square foot of Disney in your example, that value is actually changing too. On some days it may be worth more. It may be more valuable. Oh, and then also there's going to be days where it's going to go down in value too. So it's not an actual like physical dollar amount similar to your bank account. You don't have, you know, 1,000 less dollars if you see your account value go down. Very likely, maybe the next day it's going to go back up. And so what we're seeing is the actual fluctuation on a daily basis that those mutual funds, those investments that you hold, are valued at in the market.
So like in the example of my square foot of Disney saying, when I see the balance changing, I didn't lose my square foot of Disney. I still have it. It's just that maybe it's still 2020. I'm still sporting my quarantine beard and the parks are closed. So they're saying that square foot isn't worth as much. I like that. So when the balance goes down, I hear lots of people, I heard it back in 2008. I heard it in 2020 in March, people going, oh, I lost so much money. I lost all this money in March of 2020 because they logged on and their balance was $2,000 less than it was 2 weeks ago. That was a very real thing that happened in March of this year. So when the balance goes down, did I actually lose money?
You haven't actually lost money yet, right? So the value goes down, of course. And in March, you know, most, if not all, investors felt that volatility, felt that fluctuation. And a lot of people think, oh, my goodness, I need to sell. I need to sell my investments because they're down. Well, selling is where you're actually going to assign a dollar value to your investments. And that's a good opportunity, right, to actually lose money like you mentioned. So there's a few ways that you can actually, you know, your account value can actually decrease permanently. And that's selling is one of those things. And I think I jumped ahead a little bit, but withdrawals, you know, taking loans or changing funds when the market's down, these are ways that you're actually going to lock in losses or sometimes you can lock in gains too, and that's when your actual account value is going to decrease. So for example, if I take a withdrawal from my 401k plan, I take a loan from my 401k plan, I actually have to sell my shares of those investments, of those mutual funds, to get the cash, to get the actual dollar figure, right? And so at that point, absolutely, my account balance is truly going to go down in value because I'm taking cash out of my account. Similarly speaking, when you change investments, so for example, in March, when we're all feeling a lot of that volatility, many of us may have decided to change investments. So from mutual fund A to mutual fund B. Well, in order to do that, I have to sell my stake in mutual fund A, therefore, selling that square foot of Disney, taking the cash value for it, and then I use those proceeds essentially to purchase square foot in Apple, right? And so I'm actually locking in the firm value, and sometimes that results in a loss, and sometimes that results in a gain.
So if I do any of these three things right here, that involves selling what I have. So if, like selling my square foot of Disney when the parks are closed and people say it's not worth as much as it was when I got it, all these could lock in a loss if we do it at the wrong time, right? So like taking a withdrawal is like selling my square foot of Disney and taking all the cash. Changing funds, and I like your examples, selling Disney and picking up Apple, and it all depends on what those prices are. So it sounds like this is a kind of thing that we would probably want to talk to somebody about before making those decisions if we see a big market fluctuation and we have the thought of, I lost money. But I think the most important, I like what you said, that you haven't lost money yet when you see the balance change or the balance go down. You actually have to do something like one of these three things. You also mentioned long-term. Why don't you explain to us what you mean by long-term investor?
Yeah, so retirement investing, retirement planning for many of us it's a long-term play, and so sometimes it's 30 years away if you're younger, or maybe it's 10 or 5 years away if you're a little bit older, and so we have to consider the long-term impacts on what we do, the decisions that we make in terms of investing. And there's so many variables and ingredients that go into it. That's why it's super helpful to, log in through your MyAleris account, for example, and complete those retirement planning workouts. Or if you've got further questions, to reach out and contact one of us so we can help guide you through it, because it is a strategy. It is long-term investing, and we want to consider those ideas as we look towards the horizon, and especially think about that long-term impact when you're playing with the idea of either taking a loan or taking a distribution or changing your investments, because the decisions that you make now are going to have an impact 10, 15, 30 years from now. So a lot of things that go into the things that we do today could have a drastic impact on our retirement in the future.
Well, thank you, Brent. I couldn't have said it better myself, which is why I had you say it. So one of these days, I'm going to come up with a way to get you to talk about some tour in Iraq or something like that. We'll somehow relate it to personal finance. But I appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you joining us and helping explain that. As always, everything we talk about is general in nature, and nothing should be taken as investment advice. Thank you for joining us, and take care and stay safe.
Thanks so much.